Hi, my friend. In this video, we're going to be making disco house drums like DOLLA, and we're going to find out if we can do it in under 10 minutes using simple referencing and some sampling. So this here is a look at the Ableton project file, and what I'll do is we'll just solo out the tune. These are the drums that we're going to be recreating, and if I unsolo the drums, we can hear the overall track that we've recreated. If I press the S button, I've set this up so that we can actually listen to the reference track, which is DOLLA's Saving Up. So this is the actual tune that we'll be recreating. And this is what we've recreated. So I did end up creating this in about under 10 minutes. And I'm going to show you how you can quickly do it too. The main tricks, like I mentioned, are going to be referencing and particular sampling technique. And this overall project took me about, I want to say this one took me a little bit longer than normal. This took about 6 hours over the course of 5 days, which is still pretty fast. And it's fully arranged, mixed, mastered, and ready to go. And if finishing songs fast is something that you need help with, I've made a completely free ultimate song finishing toolkit. It includes the 5-step song finishing ebook that I've created, a collection of samples, presets, and Ableton racks that I use in every single one of my projects. And there's also a third extra special gift that you'll have to see for yourself. So just visit the link in the description or the link that's on screen now, and you'll be able to grab that for free. And with that said, let's jump into this video. All right. So we're back in the Ableton project file here, and we are listening to the drums that we'll be recreating. First thing is I'm going to kind of go through this in the order that I actually created it so that you'll have a good idea of how you can recreate this to yourself if you were going to go about this. So the very first thing that I built up was the kick drum. So I'll go ahead and just mute all these tracks so we can just focus in on the kick drum. So this is what the kick drum sounds like, and the way that I got this is a particularly special way. And what I did was I'm going to press the S key, and we're listening right now to the actual DOLLA song. And essentially what I did to recreate this is I went into this track right here. Let me just pause it. And I found a kick sample. So for example, I think it was potentially this right here. So if we just listen to that, let me just isolate that out for you so you can hear it. So it's just this. So you can hear there's just that kick drum. And essentially what I did is there's this cool technique that I learned from an artist called DOLLA. And basically all you do is you isolate the kick drum that you want, and then you drop it into 3 different tracks. So over here, we can see I've labeled this one called high, this one called medium, and this one called low. And within each, what you do is you can set up a multi-band compressor, or you can use an EQ to make sure that there's a high cut on the, you're only listening to the highs on the high track, only the mids on the mid track, and only the lows on the low track. Then you can then consolidate those individual tracks, and then you'll see when you consolidate them, the highs will just show how much sample is remaining for each of these frequency lengths. And then you can then adjust the lengths to kind of remove any of the other sounds. So you can see there's a lot has been removed here from the high end to kind of get rid of that like high end kind of hi-hat sounds or any of those kind of sounds. And a little bit less has been removed from the mids, a little bit even less has been removed from the low end. And then what we end up with is, let's turn this off. Then we end up is this. Then I just dropped that sample that I ended up coming up with there, dropping it into a MIDI clip here, threw it in. In terms of processing, what we have is just a bit of saturation. And then at the end, I have this last little bit here. You can see I changed the color. I added an auto filter just on this. So whenever I put this in, there'll be kind of that low cut kind of sound that's pretty common in dance music. So that's a look at the drums. If you want a more detailed explanation tutorial of that process, let me know and I can make a dedicated video explaining it in a lot more detail. But main thing is, once isolating the drums, the main thing that I did was I set up so that this reference track here, the solo key, is mapped to the S on my keyboard. So I could flick between them back and forth. And what I did was, once finding that kick sound, I'd flick back and forth and try to get the volume of my kick to be the same volume of the actual kick. And that's really important because what I've been finding is that volume is like 80% of the way. That's kind of the 80-20 rule of mixing here, getting the volumes right. Then I just added a little bit of saturation and that was it. Then the next thing that I added in was this top loop. Actually, yeah. So what I went for here is, if you can hear, the main thing I was looking for was that like the open hat, the open hat, that kind of like rhythm is what I could hear when listening to the reference track. Open hat, open hat, open hat. So like that. So if you listen back and forth, like that. So I looked for a kind of a, I think I took up disco drum loops potentially. Ended up finding one that kind of had the vibe, and I had to cut it up a little bit so that open hi-hat was happening on the last bar of every 4 bars. And then just change it up so that it doesn't happen in the last little bit. In terms of processing here, just removing a bunch of lows to make room for like the kick drum, primarily a bit of 1 knob sidechain, a bit of 1 knob saturation, and a bit of 1 knob width. Again, if you want a little bit more of detail of how I go about doing this kind of mixing as you go process, this is the channel strip that loads up every time that I'm working on any track, because I'll always be making slight adjustments by removing some of the lows, potentially side chaining, add a bit of saturation and width. If you want to learn a bit more about that as well, let me know in the comments. The next thing that I added in was the hi-hat. And this, if you look at the MIDI, is mostly just like that every other beat kind of standard hi-hat. And then every few notes I just changed, so it's a different sample triggering, just to add a little bit of groove and character. And I think if we listen back to the reference, it's mostly just an open hi-hat. So this was just something I added for a little bit of extra groove and character for mine. Next thing we'll look at is the claps. Oh, and I guess let's look at if there's any processing. In terms of processing, no, just straight up hi-hat. So that is what it is. Next up, we have this clap. So if we look at the clap, the main thing is that it's a clap where you'd expect it to, the 2, 4, 2, 4, and then at the end, there's that ka-ka. So if you listen to the track, that kind of idea is the main thing there. And again, when setting the levels, I was flicking back and forth, trying to get the sound correct there. In terms of the processing, removing some of the lows, adding some saturation to bring in some of the other harmonics, kind of fill up the sound, and then using this 1 knob width plugin to move things to the side a little bit. Next, we have the snare, which is, the pattern is very similar. It's on the 2 and the 4. And then for this one, I've set it so that it does that cat kind of idea every 2 bars. In terms of the sound design and the volumes, again, the main thing was flicking back and forth, trying to get the sound right and the volumes right. Then in terms of processing, standard stuff, removing some of the lows, no sidechain on this. I wanted to just come through fully, some saturation to fill up the sound, no width or anything like that. It's kind of taking care of the middle, the claps are taking care of the sides. Next up is the open hi-hat. And there's a couple of things that I did here. One is you'll see there's a Freeze 14 DOLLA. So basically what I did here is I just went back into the reference track. We'll listen to that again. And I found a slice where that open hat was playing by itself, grabbed it, and then dropped it into this drum rack here. And if we go back to it, you can see I have the DOLLA one playing, and I've also reinforced it with another sound that I liked. So taking the sample is one thing, and then also reinforcing with other sound to kind of increase, like have a different character to it, and also to fill out the sound a little bit more. In terms of the sound design, using the actual sound helps a lot. So that's one thing. And then going back and forth again between the reference and then our track to get the volumes right is really the main key thing. Again, we have a little bit of some 1 knob saturation. Well, 1 knob, this is what the actual saturator looks like. I've just set up for 1 knob. This is what it looks like when you do it by itself, just using the output saturator, bringing the drive up a bunch, and then kind of bringing the volume back a little with the output. Using the transient designer a little bit to get rid of decrease the sustain of the note, so it tightens it up a little bit, and then a little bit of 1 knob width pushing it to the side. And that's the drums for the most part. Then there also is this track here. These little fills. So if you listen, there's like a reverse sound. Another one right here with a fill. And then another reverse sound. And then a reverse sound with a fill. And now we'll listen to ours. Reverse. Reverse sound with a fill. And basically what I did here was I just grabbed the samples that I was using, the snares and the clap sounds in these tracks here, reverse them on an audio track by pressing the R key, and just set them up so that they're swelling into the where the notes should be played. And then I found this little drum fill, and I found another drum fill. Just found those on Splice. They sounded pretty similar and kind of cool. Mixed them in by flicking back and forth between the reference. And boom, there we have it. So that's a look at the drums. I also have the, as far as the final mix goes, I left the kick on its own. I was liking how it was sounding just as it is. But all these, the drums, the tops, hi-hats, claps, snares, open hats, etc., I've grouped that together into a group called drums. I have some light compression going on, going for about 2 decibels of gain reduction or so with a pretty fast attack, super fast release. Then that 2 decibels gain reduction, kind of bringing it back with the oxygen inflator, which is basically a saturator, going with some very minimal amounts of the effect here, trying to oversaturate my stuff too much. And then finally going into a K clip where I'm shaving off about 0.4 decibels and bring up the volume a little bit to compensate for what was lost from the compressor. And that is a look at the drums. In the next video, we'll be going over the bass. Next video after that, we'll go over the synths and vocals, and then the arrangement. And there you have it. Hello again, my friend. Hopefully you found that video useful. If you'd like to follow along yourself with the 5-step song finishing checklist, there will be a link in the description below where you can get access to that completely for free, and it's going to help you finish your songs a lot faster and better than ever before. If you found this video useful, like and subscribe and all that good stuff, but really the best thing I can do for you is hook you up with that free checklist, so make sure you check that one. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video, my friend. Have a good one.